I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
You could say that.
I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up. Ironically, this is not far from the truth. Do you believe in fate, Neo?
No,
Why not?
because I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life.
I know exactly what you mean. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
And stood for certain propositions that would make America strong and healthy and grow the middle class and shrink poverty and stand against communism. And after 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go
I'm
on.
sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee. And, look, I look forward...
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us? Not much, because it's a secret.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
you go outside the city of Atlanta, go east about 60 or 70 miles to the town of Elberton, and then go north on Highway 77 about 10 miles, you'll find off to the right what's called the Georgia Guidestones. It looks kind of like Stonehenge, these big, huge granite rocks set up there. This was done by a guy who gave a pseudonym, came in, paid cash, had this company set these things up in 1980. He called himself R.C. Christian, but that's not his real name. It says right on the stones, a pseudonym, false name. On these Georgia Guidestones, it gives the 10 Commandments for the New World Order. 10 Commandments for the New World Order. The first commandment was to maintain humanity under 500 million. I went there and looked at those things and said, now, hold on a minute. Today's population is 6 billion. They want to maintain humanity under 0.5 billion. Looks like a lot of people got to die for their plan to work, which is, by the way, the plan. Jacques Cousteau said we'd have to eliminate 350,000 people a day. 1/3 of a million people a day would have to be eliminated to save Mother Earth. Bill Clinton said we need to reduce the population of the Earth to 1 billion. There are a lot of folks who would like to reduce the population of the Earth. The Bible command is quite the opposite.
My friends, the information that you are about to witness from all of my years of research is the most important. It's been hidden in plain view the entire time. This is the ultimate secret, and it's about to be exposed. I have hundreds of government documents, textbooks, white papers, where for over 80 years, the elite of the Western world have talked about adulterating food and water to sicken and sterilize the population for the purpose of eugenics. It's all covered in the book, Eco-Science, written by the White House science czar, John P. Holdren, where they talk about a planetary police state to carry out the forced sterilization. They also talk about covert systems in the water and food to sterilize the population. Now, this was written decades ago, before he was White House science czar. Now, suddenly, the stuff in this book is all over the news. They're selling it to the public as if it's a good thing. You see here before you what an average person would buy when they went shopping at the store. Not everything here is bad for you, but much of it has compounds and artificial chemicals that have been added that are extremely toxic and bad for your health, and they have known this the entire time, and they have approved them for use. Let's start with aspartame. You cannot go to the grocery store now and buy any type of even regular sugar gum that hasn't had aspartame added to it. In the 1970s, Searle tried to get it approved, and they couldn't. It took them 3 separate times because in their own studies with monkeys, large portions of them that were fed it died and contracted cancer. Now we have mainstream news articles, and the EU has done a major study finding lower birth weights, early birth, and yes, miscarriages from women that drink aspartame-laden soft drinks like Coke Zero. What is aspartame? It is the fecal matter of the E. coli bacteria. They took it and genetically engineered it. They can feed it toxic waste, and then it defecates aspartame. And it has so many bad health effects, it's just unspeakable. This is being done by design. It's also very, very addictive. But let's just go ahead and move away from aspartame and talk about McDonald's and chicken McNuggets. Now, I remember a decade ago or so reading health advisories claiming that a form of plastic that's used in silly putty, basically a type of silicone, was in the chicken McNuggets, but also in many other TV dinners and other foods. It is illegal in every other nation in the world to add these chemicals to the food, but it's not in the United States. The big secret is all of this was done by design by the FDA. Look at all the drugs they've approved, and then it comes out later that they knowingly approve them when these drugs are causing heart attacks and cancer. In the Nuremberg trials, it came out that the Nazis were adding sodium fluoride to the water supply in the labor camps and death camps to make the population more docile and controllable. There had been hundreds of university studies before Hitler even came to power. This is a form of forced medication. They admit that 1 part per million of sodium fluoride more than doubles the chance of bone cancer in boys and men. As the public became educated in the last few decades, the government and industry's response was to not just put it in water, but to start adding it to thousands of products like children's water that's mixed with their formula or with their cereal. They started adding as much as 900 parts per million in things like powdered eggs. It causes reductions in IQ. It increases sterility or lack of fertility, and it's being added to so many of the daily staples that we consume. We'll get back to food additives in a moment. But first, I wanted to look at genetically modified organisms. Did you know for many years the American people have been eating cloned beef and pork, and now they're expanding out into other forms of meat? Let's look at salmon first. Major university studies conclusively have proven that the type of genetically modified salmon that is actually a cross species, they've mixed other animal genes in with it, that when this fish is introduced with wild natural salmon, within 40 generations, all of the natural salmon are extinct. And the FDA approved this. And they're going to allow it to be released into the wild that isn't even a salmon. It is a cross-species chimera. It is a mixture like something out of the island of Dr. Moreau, something out of a nightmare. More than 85% of the corn now consumed in the United States, and it's also starting to trend that way in Europe and Canada, is genetically engineered. It grows its own pesticide within the corn kernels so that insects won't eat it. If the insects can't eat this and live, what do you think is going to happen when lab rats or humans eat it? We have literally hundreds of studies showing that not just Monsanto's, but other major GMO companies' corn, and that's the majority of corn we're now eating today in the United States, has been linked to organ failure in lab animals. The studies also show massive increases in sterility in rats and guinea pigs that are fed not just GMO corn, but GMO cotton seeds. Studies in India, Germany, and the United States have conclusively shown that when they feed the cotton seeds left over from the cotton crop from these genetically modified varieties, that the cows are having miscarriages, they are having low birth weights, or in many cases, they're simply dying. And what is in most processed foods? Genetically modified cottonseed oil. Major studies are also showing that genetically engineered crops are killing honeybees and monarch butterflies. But they don't stop there. Now they claim they're coming out with a genetically engineered mosquito that's malaria-proof that they're going to release into the open biosphere. The very genetic code of the planet is being butchered in a hostile corporate takeover. Many years ago, an executive from Monsanto was quoted in National Geographic as saying that that is their program, that they want to basically have their crops and their organisms take over the entire biosphere of this planet. And the major genetic engineer companies have focused mainly on 8 major food crops. Now they're expanding out into hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other plants, literally changing the genetic code of the planet. This is a genetic dictatorship. This is genetic vandalism. And that's why the Rockefellers, the United Nations, and others have built these giant armored seed vaults all over the world, not just at the Arctic Circle. And they admit they're doing it in case all of this gets out of hand, that they'll have a type of Noah's Ark. So all these fake environmental groups, they never complain about this. They never talk about true environmental degradation. They want to put a tax on carbon dioxide that humans exhale, that plants respirate from and carry out photosynthesis with, as a way to shut down industrial society and control every facet of our lives. That's the big secret. This is a population reduction program. It is an epidemic. The sperm count has dropped in the Western world exponentially. Even the government has been predicting within another generation, almost everyone is going to be sterile. This is the globalist religion. This is their philosophy. They want the planet for themselves. The UN has said that their stated plan is an 80% population reduction. You've heard Ted Turner call us useless eaters and feeders and say that 80% of us need to be killed. You've heard Prince Philip say he wants to come back as a virus to kill the majority of the world population. Dr. Eric Pianka, Peter Singer, it's all over the news where they tell us that we should only have one child because more than one is bad for the environment, and that the recession is good for lowering our carbon footprint. This is the big secret. We live in a scientific dictatorship, and the United States and England are the epicenter of this, and it's expanding worldwide. Remember all the secret testing, all the secret sterilization that went on in the United States and Europe. Remember what Hitler did. He learned all of that from the eugenicist and the Rockefeller family in the United States. This is a culture of death being pushed on you and your family. And even if you think the world is overpopulated, you need to understand that you're being targeted by this as well. Targeted by design. Recombinant bovine growth hormone in your milk, making 8-year-old girls go into puberty when they should be going into puberty at 12 or 13. Silicone in chicken McNuggets and hundreds of other processed foods. Aspartame, that is the feces of genetically engineered bacteria that has incredible health problems that have been proven. Think for yourself. It goes on and on. ABC News, this goes back 4 years ago. Viral meat spray, advancing food safety. They spray a live virus on the meat to supposedly kill the bacteria. This is a live vaccine they spray on most of the meat you're consuming that you're buying from the store. It gets even worse. The petroleum distillates, or toxic waste that's left over from petroleum refineries that refine oil into gasoline, they take these tens of millions of pounds of toxic waste that's left over, the fluoride, the mercury, the lead, and they dump it on crops as supposed fertilizer. And what do crops like tomatoes and corn and potatoes do? They pull in all of those toxins out of the ground. In fact, scientists for many years have used plants to actually detoxify areas that have been contaminated. And those plants are pulling all of this up, and then you are eating it. That's why the Washington Post reported in January of 2008 that a major study found that nearly 1/3 of the 55 popular brand name foods and beverage products were filled with mercury. Despite the fact that the people of Europe for over 20 years have fought off all the genetically modified wheat and corn and other crops being planted in their nation, now the EU is buckled and is accepting it. The United States is literally a testing ground for all of this. It's just automatically approved. And the people that work for these corporations, they're compartmentalized. They don't know what's going on. The people that work at these stores, they have no idea what's happening. This is affecting all of us. This is hurting everyone. Many different forms of cancer are growing by thousands of percentage points. Diabetes, all these different diseases. And in major studies, it's all been linked to the toxic additives that are in our food, our water. And I haven't even had time to get into MSG. I mean, I've interviewed brain surgeons, neurologists, scientists. I mean, it just devastates the brain. It's an excitotoxin. It destroys the liver, and it is in tens of thousands of products. We can say no. We can stand up. But if you've got a neighbor giving fluoride water to their baby, please go over and warn them. If you got a neighbor that's sitting there eating MSG-filled chips, one after the other, warn them. You've got a responsibility. If you know people that are feeding processed foods filled with GMO, warn them. And for God's sakes, don't give it to your own children. If you want to kill yourself, that's your own business. But don't hurt your children. Don't do this, ladies and gentlemen.
There's been a bit of an uproar this past week due to Obama's signing of a recent bill that has become affectionately labeled the Monsanto Protection Act, or H.R. 933. So much so that it's led Senator Barbara Mikulski to publicly apologize for letting the provisions slip through. However, this is really only a small part of a much bigger pattern of corruption and collusion between Monsanto and the U.S. government. Senator Roy Blunt, a Republican from Missouri, who crafted the wording for H.R. 933, has been accused by Senator John Tester of having collaborated directly with Monsanto in the creation of the provision. This shouldn't be surprising considering that Monsanto is one of Blunt's top campaign contributors. Blunt also accepts contributions from the Crawford Group, a registered lobbyist for Monsanto. Now, the controversy in this bill is tied to Section 735, which is of course written in such a jumble of incomprehensible legalese that it's highly difficult to interpret. It's designed to make the eyes glaze over without registering that anything of significance has been stated. This is facilitated using a common legislative technique of referring to sections of a separate law, so that you have to go read the unintelligible fine print in that second document in order to understand what's actually being said. That second law in this case is the Plant Protection Act. In the description of this video, you'll find a link to both documents. Now, what Section 735 of H.R. 933 states is that if a plant is determined to be a biological pest and is therefore brought under regulation and restrictions which prevent it from being planted or transported within the U.S., the Secretary of Agriculture shall immediately grant a temporary permit or deregulation to any farmer, farm operator, or producer that requests it, regardless of what any other laws or courts may order. Now, the word genetically modified organism isn't mentioned here, and that's part of the skillful way that this was designed to slip through. Only someone who knows that by default genetically modified organisms are considered biological pests until they've been approved by the Department of Agriculture, and that they are reclassified as pests if shown unsafe, would understand the implications here. To distill this down to one sentence, if a farmer wants to grow a genetically modified plant that's been outlawed because it's been found to be harmful to the environment or human health, all they need to do is contact the Secretary of Agriculture, and they will be immediately issued a permit to cultivate these plants. Essentially, it makes it impossible to stop a genetically modified plant from being used in the United States, regardless of any laws or rulings that are made to outlaw them.
And in parenthesis, let me tell you this, that throughout the entirety of my time underground in South Africa under apartheid, every house I slept in, every dinner I ate, every car I drove in was provided by Jewish activists of the African National Congress. Dennis Goldberg, Albie Sachs, Joe Slovo, Ruth First. Perhaps you've heard of these people. If you haven't, look them up.
I've always believed that Britain is a country of migrants. I'm Jewish. Some of my family came in the late 19th century. I'm Sephardi on my mother's side.
The leaders of the socialist, communist, trade union, liberal, Enlightenment, throughout the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, were great Jews. Marx himself was a Jew.
The Liberal Democrats will always stand up for a Britain that is open, tolerant and diverse. And in that spirit, I very much welcome the Jewish European Election Manifesto, calling for a strengthening of EU hate crime legislation, stood up for the right of the Jewish community to practice shechita. As a party, we wholeheartedly value the relationship we have with the Jewish community, both in Britain and internationally.
Israel has a powerful stranglehold on the American government. They control both members of the House and the Senate. They have us involved in wars of which we have little or no interest. Our children are coming back in body bags. Our nation is bankrupt over these wars. And if you open your mouth, you get targeted.
We went to war against a guy who had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. It was a total pretext. It's inexplicable. And there you go to Cheney, there you go to Bush, there you go to the Jewish neocons who wanted to remake the world. Maybe I can say that because I'm Jewish.
I'm saying this to you right now. Israel gets approximately $15 billion a year from the American taxpayers. That $15 billion is $30,000 for every man, woman, and child. And people in my district are losing their pension benefits. It's an objective assessment that no one will have the courage to speak about. They're controlling much of our foreign policy. They're influencing much of our domestic policy. Wolfowitz, as Undersecretary of Defense, manipulated President Bush #2 back into Iraq. They pushed definitely to try and get Bush before he left to move into Iran. We're conducting an expansionist policy of Israel, and everybody's afraid to say it. They control much of the media, they control much of the commerce of the country, and they control powerfully both bodies of the Congress.
No doubt that within the occupied territories, Palestinian land, that there is a horrendous example of apartheid. The persecution of the Palestinians now under the occupied territories is under the occupation forces is one of the worst examples of human rights deprivation that I know. People in this country, in America, never know about this. They never discuss this. There's no debate about it. There's no criticism of Israel.
Hollywood is run by Jews. It's owned by Jews.
In Germany, isn't the situation there indicative of the rest of the European continent, where we're actually seeing the EU expanding more and more? How do you now see the future of the issue of immigration developing now across the whole of the European continent, based on what you're seeing there in Germany?
This is a very good point, because immigration is the future.
This model is actually being pushed to its limits now. There's a very high level of ethnic mix in Sweden. I think it stands at about 15%. And people are saying Sweden can't withstand this anymore.
So you have to really make a good policy of immigration all over Europe. You have to really change the policy of immigration inside Europe. This is very important. You have to adapt the educational system and adapt all the self-understanding of the states. They are not anymore only white or only Swedish or only Portuguese or only German. They are multicultural places.
The current wave of anti-Semitism in Sweden will pass, and that Jews have an important role to play in a country undergoing profound change.
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role.
The Jews are the only people in the world who have found hostility in every country in which they settled in any numbers. The big question is, why? Today it is taught in schools that anti-Semitism began in Germany in the 1930s, after which they were deported. What is not studied is the fact that at one time or other, the Jews have been expelled from every nation in Europe. The Jews claim that they are only a religion. The truth is that the Jews are a race. Less than 30% are members of any synagogue. Whether they are Orthodox religious, atheists, capitalists, or communists, they still claim to be Jews, members of the Jewish race. Every race has inherited traits. In the case of the Jews, they include trading, money changing, usury, and a loathing for productive labor, which is scorned as beneath the dignity of the Jews in their Bible called the Talmud. The Jew has not changed since the days when Jesus Christ took up a whip and drove the money changers out of the temple. Jews have always united to form monopolies. Today they control all the department store chains and specialty shops, along with the lucrative jewelry and animal fur trade. Jews dominate the fields of all precious metals such as gold, silver, platinum, tin, lead, etc. They will always band together to drive Gentile competitors out of business. Today, America is being flooded with Jewish immigrants from Russia, and many leave Israel for the United States, all with dollar signs in their eyes. Jews have used their vaunted money power to seize control of the Democratic Party and constitute over 50% of all its financial contributions. Today, they are buying up more and more major U.S. companies. While only 3% of the population, the Jew controls over 25% of the nation's wealth, and this percentage rises every year. They are the only racial group totally organized to work for political domination over America. Opposition to the Jews did not begin in Germany, but dates back before the birth of Christ, over 2,000 years ago. Study the statements made by the world's greatest men. They reveal why the wandering Jew has made enemies out of every host country that ever accepted them. Cicero, softly, softly, I want none but the judges to hear me. The Jews have already gotten me into a fine mess, as they have many other gentlemen. I have no desire to furnish further grist for their mills. Cicero was serving as defense counsel at the trial of Flaccus, a Roman official who interfered with Jewish gold shipments to their international headquarters, then as now in Jerusalem. Cicero himself certainly was not a nobody, and for one of this stature to have to speak softly shows that he was in the presence of a dangerously powerful sphere of influence. And on another occasion, Cicero wrote, "The Jews belong to a dark and repulsive force. One knows how numerous this clique is, how they stick together, and what power they exercise through their unions. They are a nation of rascals and deceivers." He had furthermore stated, "The customs of that most criminal nation have gained such strength that they have now been received in all lands. The conquered have given laws to the conquerors." Dio Cassius, the 2nd century Roman historian, describing the savage Jewish uprising against the Roman Empire that has been acknowledged as the turning point downward in the course of that great state, said, "The Jews were destroying both Greeks and Romans. They ate the flesh of their victims, made belts for themselves out of their entrails, and daubed themselves with their blood. In all, 220,000 men perished in Cyrene, and 240,000 in Cyprus. And for this reason, no Jew may set foot in Cyprus today." Diodorus Siculus, a 1st century Greek historian, observed that Jews treated other people as enemies and inferiors. Usury is the practice of lending money at excessive interest rates. This has for centuries caused great misery and poverty for Gentiles. It has brought strong condemnation of the Jew. A mild man who extolled patience and charity in normal circumstances, he described himself as a barking dog when dealing with the Jew. "Jewish usurers bleed the poor to death and grow fat on their substance. And I, who live on alms, who feed on the bread of the poor, shall I then be mute before outraged charity? Dogs bark to protect those who feed them. And I, who am fed by the poor, shall I see them robbed of what belongs to them and keep silent?" In his The Governance of the Jews, he wrote, "The Jews should not be allowed to keep what they have obtained from others by usury. It were best that they were compelled to work so that they could earn their living instead of doing nothing but becoming avaricious." There is already something like a Jewish monopoly in high finance. There is the same element of Jewish monopoly in the silver trade and in the control of various other metals, notably lead, nickel, quicksilver. What is most disquieting of all, this tendency to monopoly is spreading like a disease. In 1937, Beamish stated, "The Boer War occurred 37 years ago. Boer means farmer. Many criticized a great power like Britain for trying to wipe out the Boers. Upon making inquiry, I found all the gold and diamond mines of South Africa were owned by Jews. That Rothschild controlled gold, Samuels controlled silver, Baum controlled other mining, and Moses controlled base metals. Anything these people touch, they inevitably pollute. The Montefors have taken Australia for their own, and there is not a gold field or a sheep run from Tasmania to to New South Wales that does not pay them a heavy tribute. They are the real owners of the Antipodean continent. What is the good of our being a wealthy nation if the wealth is all in the hands of German Jews? All the world suffers from the usury of the Jews, their monopolies and deceit. They have brought many unfortunate people into a state of poverty, especially the farmers, working class people, and the very poor. Then, as now, Jews have to be reminded intermittently anew that they were enjoying rights in any country since they left Palestine and the Arabian desert, and subsequently their ethical and moral doctrines, as well as their deeds, rightly deserve to be exposed to criticism in whatever country they happen to live. Since the earliest times, it is as the exploiter that the Jew has been known amongst his fellow men of all races and creeds. Moreover, he has persistently shown himself ungrateful. The Jews have always formed a rebellious element in every state. The day will come when all nations, amidst which the Jews are dwelling, will have to raise the question of their wholesale expulsion, a question which will be one of life or death, good health or chronic disease, peaceful existence or perpetual social fever. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. Then answered the Jews from the Gospel of John. But the Jews are so hardened that they listen to nothing. Though overcome by testimonies, they yield not an inch. It is a pernicious race, oppressing all men by their usury and rapine. If they give a prince or magistrate 1,000 florins, they extort 20,000 from the subjects in payment. We must ever keep on guard against them. Let me say just one word about the Jew and the black man. The Jew is always anxious to advise the black man, but he never advises him how to solve the problem the way the Jews solved their problem. The Jew never went sitting in and crawling in and sliding in and freedom riding like he teaches and helps Negroes to do. The Jews stood up and stood together, and they used their ultimate power, the economic weapon. The Jews pooled their money and bought hotels that barred them. Barred the Negro. They bought Atlantic City and Miami Beach and anything else they wanted. Who owns Hollywood? Who runs the garment industry, the largest industry in New York City? But the Jew that's advising the Negro joins the NAACP, CORE, the Urban League, and others. With money donations, the Jew gains control. Then he sends the black man doing all this wading in, boring in, even burying in, everything but buying in, never shows him how to set up factories and hotels, never advises him how to own what he wants. No, when there's something worth owning, the Jews got it. The Jews were behind all the persecutions of the Christians. They wandered through the country, everywhere, hating and undermining the Christian faith. After these things, Jesus walked in Galilee, for he would not walk in Judea, because the Jews sought to kill him. From the Gospel of John. Besides, you also have many Jews living in the country who do much harm. You should know the Jews blaspheme and violate the name of our Savior day for day. For that reason you, my lords, and men of authority, should not tolerate but expel them. They are our public enemies and incessantly blaspheme our Lord Jesus Christ. They call our Blessed Virgin Mary a harlot, and her Holy Son a bastard. And to us they give the epithet of changelings and abortions. Therefore deal with them harshly, as they do nothing but excruciatingly blaspheme our Lord Jesus Christ, trying to rob us of our lives, our health, our honor and belongings. Henceforth no Jew, no matter under what name, will be allowed to remain here without my written permission. I know of no other troublesome pest within the state than this race, which impoverish the people by their fraud, usury, and money lending, and commits all deeds which an honorable man despises. Subsequently, they have to be removed and excluded from here as much as possible. In his famous encyclopedia, the Bible of the pre-revolutionary French Enlightenment has often been complained of by Jewish writers as anti-Semitic. Some of his other writings are likewise unfriendly. Quote, "And you, angry and brutish people, vile and vulgar men, slaves worthy of the yoke," or Talmudism, "which you bear, go take back your books and remove yourself from me." The Talmud taught the Jews to steal the goods of Christians, to regard them as savage beasts, to push them over the precipice, to kill them with impunity, and to utter every morning the most horrible imprecations against them. The Jewish conception of the Jews as the chosen people who must eventually rule the world forms indeed the basis of rabbinical Judaism. The Jewish religion now takes its stand on the Talmud rather than on the Bible. No obstacle discourages them. They persevere throughout the world, throughout the centuries, the unity of their race. The Talmud has given them a powerful organization which modern progress has been unable to change. Deep, ineradicable hatred of everything that is not Jewish stimulates them in war, which they wage against Christian society, which is too divided to be able to fight with necessary energy. Indeed, it is because we, the Gentiles, are divided in so many groups, whether it be race, denomination, or some other division, that keeps us from uniting against this common, terrible enemy. The Jews form a state, and, obeying their own laws, they evade those of their host country. The Jews always consider an oath regarding a Christian not binding. During the campaign of 1812, the Jews were spies. They were paid by both sides. They betrayed both sides. Whoever is a friend of a Jew, belong to them, become one of them. God cannot tolerate this mean people. The Jews have wandered from divine religion. You must not relent in your work, which must show up Jewish deceit. In his The New Atlantis, he remarked that Jews, quote, hate the name of Christ and have a secret and innate rancor against the people among whom they live. He also disapproved of non-Jewish usurers as Judaizers, who would wear tawny bonnets like Jews. They are the real liars and bloodhounds who have not only perverted and falsified the entire scriptures from beginning to end, and without ceasing with their interpretations, and all the anxious sighing, longing, and hoping of their hearts is directed to the time when someday they would like to deal with us heathen as they dealt with the heathen in Persia at the time of Esther, on how they love the book of Esther, which so nicely agrees with their bloodthirsty, revengeful, and murderous desire and hope. The sun never did shine on a more bloodthirsty and revengeful people as they, who imagine to be the people of God, and who desire to and think they must murder and crush the heathen. And the foremost undertaking which they expect of their Messiah is that he should slay and murder the whole world with the sword, as they at first demonstrated against us Christians, and would like to do now, if they only could, have also tried it often, and have been repeatedly struck on the snouts. Their breath stinks of the gold and silver of the heathen, since no people under the sun always have been, still are, and always will remain more avaricious than they, as can be noticed in their cursed usury. They also find comfort with this. Quote, when the Messiah comes, he shall take all the gold and silver in the world and distribute it among the Jews. Thus, wherever they can direct Scripture to their insatiable avarice, they wickedly do so. Therefore know, my dear Christians, that next to the devil, you have no more bitter, more poisonous, more vehement an enemy than a real Jew who earnestly desires to be a Jew. There may be some among them who believe what the cow or the goose believes, but all of them are surrounded with their blood and circumcision. In history, therefore, they are often accused of poisoning wells, stealing children, and mutilating them, as in Trent, Wetsensi, and the like. Of course, they deny this, be it so or not. However, I know full well that the ready will is not lacking with them if they could only transform it into deeds, in secret or openly. A person who does not know the devil might wonder why they are so at enmity with the Christians above all others, for which they have no reason, since we are only good to them. They live among us, in our homes, under our protection, use land and highways, market and streets. Princes and government sit by, snore, and have their maws open. Let the Jews take from their purse and chest, steal and rob whatever they will. That is, they permit themselves and their subjects to be abused and sucked dry and reduced to beggars with their own money through the usury of the Jews. For the Jews, as foreigners, certainly should have nothing from us, and what they have certainly must be ours. They do not work, do not earn anything from us, neither do we donate or give it to them. Yet they have our money and goods and our lords in our land where they are supposed to be in exile. If a thief steals 10 gulden, he must hang. If he robs people on the highway, his head is gone. But a Jew, when he steals 10 tons of gold through his usury, is dearer than God himself? Did not their Talmud and rabbis write that it is no sin to kill if a Jew kills a heathen, but it is a sin if he kills a brother in Israel? It is no sin if he does not keep his oath to a heathen. Therefore, to steal and rob, as they do with their money lending from a heathen, is a divine service. And they are the masters of the world, and we are their servants, yea, their cattle. I maintain that in 3 fables of Aesop, there is more wisdom to be found than in all the books of the Talmudists and rabbis, and more than ever could come into the hearts of the Jews. Should someone think I am saying too much, I am saying much too little, for I see in their writings and how they curse us goyim and wish us all evil in their schools and prayers. They rob us of our money through usury, and wherever they are able, they play us all manner of mean tricks. No heathen has done such things, and none would do so except the devil himself, and those whom he possesses, as he possesses the Jews. Virginus, who was a very learned rabbi among them, and by the grace of God became a Christian, which seldom occurs, is much moved that in their schools they so horribly curse us Christians, as Lyra also writes, and from that draws the conclusion that they must not be the people of God. Now behold, what a nice, thick, fat lie it is when they complain about being captives among us. Jerusalem was destroyed more than 1,400 years ago. During that time, we Christians have been tortured and persecuted by the Jews in all the world. On top of that, we do not know to this day what devil brought them into our country. We did not fetch them from Jerusalem. Yes, we have and hold them captive, as I would like to keep my rheumatism and all other diseases and misfortunes, who must wait as a poor servant with money and property and everything I have. I wish they were in Jerusalem with the other Jews, and whomsoever they would like to have with them. Now what are we going to do with these rejected, condemned Jewish people? Let us apply the ordinary wisdom of other nations like France, Spain, Bohemia, and all the rest, who made them give an account of what they had stolen through usury, and divided it evenly, but expelled them from their country. For, as heard before, God's wrath is so great over them that through soft mercy they only become more wicked. Through hard treatment, however, only a little better. Therefore, away with them. How much more unbearable it is that we should permit the entire Christendom and all of us to be brought with our own money, be slandered and cursed by the Jews, who on top of all that be made rich, and our lords, who laugh us to scorn and are tickled by their audacity. What a joyful affair that would be for the devil and his angels, and cause them to laugh through their snouts like a sow grinning at her little pigs, but deserving real wrath before God. Maybe mild-hearted and gentle Christians will believe that I am too rigorous and drastic against the poor afflicted Jews, believing that I ridicule them and treat them with much sarcasm. By my word, I am far too weak to be able to ridicule such a satanic brood. I would fain to do so, but they are far greater adepts at mockery than I, and possess a God who is master in this art. It is the evil one himself. Even with no further evidence than the Old Testament, I would maintain, and no person on earth could alter my opinion, that the Jews, as they are today, are vertably a mixture of all the depraved and malevolent knaves of the whole world over, who have been dispersed in all countries, similarly to the Tartars, gypsies, and such folk. When we were working in Chicago, we had numerous rent strikes on the west side, and it was unfortunately true that in most instances the persons we had to conduct these strikes against were Jewish landlords. There was a time when the west side of Chicago was a Jewish ghetto, and when the Jewish community started moving out into other areas, they still owned the property there, and all the problems of the landlord came into being. We were living in a slum apartment owned by a Jew and a number of others, and we had to have a rent strike. We were paying $94 for 4 rundown, shabby rooms, and we would go out on our open housing marches on Gage Park and other places, and we discovered that whites with 5 sanitary, nice, new rooms, apartments with 5 rooms, were paying only $78 a month. We were paying 20% tax. The Negro ends up paying a color tax. and this has happened in instances where Negroes actually confronted Jews as the landlord or the storekeeper. The irrational statements that have been made are the result of these confrontations. The Jews who have arrived would nearly all like to remain here, but learning that they, with their customary usury and deceitful trading with the Christians, were very repugnant to the inferior magistrates, as also to the people having the most affection for you, the deaconry also fearing that owing to their present indignance they might become a change in the coming winter, we have, for the benefit of this weak, newly developing place and land in general, deemed it useful to acquire them in a friendly way to depart, praying also most seriously in this connection for ourselves also for the general community of your worships, that the deceitful race, such hateful enemies and blasphemers of the name of Christ, not be allowed further to infect and trouble this new colony. The Jews whom he attempted to oust merely applied to their fellow Jews in Holland, and the order came back from the company countermanding the expulsion. For a similar situation during the Civil War, we'll reference Ulysses S. Grant. Among the reasons given by their worships for overruling their governor, one stands out rather glaringly. In view of the usual Jewish contention that their people were poor and persecuted, and also because of the large amount of capital which they have invested in shares of this company. In a history of Savannah, on January 5th, 1734, the trustees ordered that 3 Jews who had been sending co-religionists into the colony without authorization, quote, use their endeavors that the said Jews may be removed from the colony of Georgia as the best and only satisfaction that they can give to the trustees for such an indignity offered to gentlemen acting under His Majesty's charter, unquote. Dispersed as the Jews are, they still form one nation, foreign to the land they live in. Those who labor in the earth are the chosen people of God, if ever He had a chosen people. There is no need to be delicate on the Jewish question. You must face them in this country. The Jews should be satisfied here. I was here 47 years ago. Your doors were thrown open, and you were then free. Now He has got you absolutely by the throat. That is their reward. Lord Harrington opposed admission of Jewish immigrants to England because, quote, they are the great moneylenders and loan contractors of the world. The consequence is that the nations of the world are groaning under heavy systems of taxation and national debt. They have ever been the greatest enemies of freedom. Jews can destroy by means of finance. Jews are international. Control of credits in this country is not in the hands of the English, but of Jews. It has become the biggest danger the British Empire ever had to face. World-famous men of the past accuse the Jews of founding communism. This charge is well-founded. The communist philosophy was drawn up by Karl Marx, who descended from a long line of rabbis. His ideology of anti-Christian and socialist thought is outlined in the Jewish Talmud, which is the Bible of the Jews. Of the 4 political groups which overthrew the Christian Tsar of Russia, 2 were 100% Jewish. They were the Mensheviks and the Jewish Bund. The other 2 were the Socialist Revolutionary Party and the Bolsheviks. Both were headed by Jews, but had some Gentile members. Today we now know that Lenin was Jewish, and all the leaders of his first government were Jews. They were Trotsky, Zinoviev, Kamenev, and Sverdlov. The wealthiest Jewish banker in the world at that time, Jacob Schiff of Kuhn Loeb Investment Bank of New York City, gave Trotsky and Lenin $20 million to overthrow the Tsar and establish the Soviet tyranny. In 1920, he wrote a long newspaper article of the recent Bolshevik seizure of Russia. After praising what he called the national Jews of Russia, he said, quote, in violent opposition to the sphere of Jewish efforts rise the schemes of international Jews. The adherents of this sinister confederacy are mostly men reared up among the unhappy populations of countries where Jews are persecuted on account of their race. Most, if not all of them, have forsaken the faith of their forefathers and divorced from their minds all spiritual hopes of the next world. This movement among the Jews is not new. From the days of Spartacus, Weishaupt, to those of Karl Marx, and down to Trotsky, Russia, Bela Kun, Hungary, Rosa Luxemburg, Germany, and Emma Goldman, United States, this worldwide revolutionary conspiracy for the overthrow of civilization and for the reconstitution of society on the basis of arrested development, of envious malevolence and impossible equality, has been steadily growing. It played, as modern writer Mrs. Webster has ably shown, a definite recognizable part in the tragedy of the French Revolution. It has been the mainspring of every subversive movement during the 19th century, and now at last this band of extraordinary personalities from the underworlds of the great cities of Europe and America have gripped the Russian people by the hair of their heads and have become practically the undisputed masters of this enormous empire. There's no need to exaggerate the part played in creating the Bolshevism and the actual bringing about the Russian Revolution by these international and for the most part atheistic Jews. It is certainly the very great one. It probably outweighs all others. With the notable exception of Lenin, the majority of the leading figures are Jews. Moreover, the principal inspiration and driving power comes from the Jewish leaders. In the Soviet institutions, the predominance of Jews is even more astounding, and the prominent, if not the principal part in the system of terrorism applied by the extraordinary commissions for combating counter-revolution has been taken by Jews, and in some notable cases by Jewesses. The same evil prominence was obtained by Jews in the brief period of terror during which Bela Kun ruled in Hungary. The same phenomenon has been presented in Germany, especially Bavaria, so far as this madness has been allowed to prey upon the temporary prostration of the German people. Although in all these countries there are many non-Jews every whit as bad as the worst Jewish revolutionaries, the part played by the latter in proportion to their numbers in the population is astonishing. Marx is a Jew and is surrounded by a crowd of little, more or less intelligent, scheming, agile, speculating Jews. Just as Jews are everywhere, commercial and banking agents, writers, politicians, correspondents for newspapers of all shades, in short, literally brokers, just as they are financial brokers, with one foot in the bank and the other in the socialist movement, and their asses sitting upon the German press. They have grabbed hold of all newspapers, and you can imagine what a nauseating literature is the outcome of it. Now this entire Jewish world, which constitutes an exploiting sect, a people of leeches, of voracious parasite, Marx feels an instinctive inclination and great respect for the Rothschilds. This may seem strange. What could there be in common between communism and high finance? Ho ho! The communism of Marx seeks a strong state centralization, and where this exists, there must inevitably exist a state central bank. And where this exists, their parasitic Jewish nation, which speculates upon the labor of the people, will always find the means for its existence. In reality, this would be for the proletariat a barrack regime, under which the working men and the working closely and intimately connected with one another, regardless not only of frontiers but of political differences as well. This Jewish world is today largely at the disposal of Marx of Rothschild. I am sure that, on one hand, the Rothschilds appreciate the merits of Marx, that, on the other hand, women, converted into a uniform mass, would rise, fall asleep, work, and live at the beat of a drum. The privilege of ruling would be in the hands of the skilled and the learned, with a wide scope left for profitable, crooked deals carried out by the Jews, who would be attracted by the enormous extension of the international speculations of the national banks. This startling piece of prediction is particularly impressive to those who have observed the Soviet scene and notice its strange relationship with capitalist financiers, overwhelmingly Jewish, since the revolution. The line runs from Olaf Achberg, self-described Bolshevik banker, who ferried to Trotsky the huge sums raised for the revolution by financiers in Europe and America, to Armand Hammer in 1970s, who has specialized in multi-million-dollar trade concessions with the now supposedly anti-Semitic commissars. A Jew cannot be a true patriot. He is something different, like a bad insect. He must be kept apart, out of place, where he can do no mischief, even by pogroms if necessary. The Jews are responsible for Bolshevism in Russia and Germany too. I was far too indulgent with them during my reign, and I bitterly regret the favors I showed the prominent Jewish bankers. The troublemakers in Hungary are the Jews. They demoralize our country, and they are the leaders of the revolutionary gang that is torturing Hungary. When it came to Mexico, the promoters of communism were the Jews. Everywhere, Marxism brings Jews on top, and this is no hazard. The propaganda of communism throughout the world in organization and direction is in the hands of Jewish agents. As for anyone who does not know that the Bolshevist movement in Russia is Jewish, I can only say that he must be a man who is taken in by the suppression of our deplorable press. It is probably unwise to say this loudly in the United States, but the Bolshevik movement is and has been since its beginning guided and controlled by Russian Jews of the greatest type, who have been in the United States and there observed every one of the worst phases of our civilization without having the least understanding of what we really mean by liberty. The communists are Jews, and Russia is being entirely administered by them. They are in every government office, bureau, and newspaper. They are driving out the Russians and are responsible for the anti-Semitic feeling which is increasing. There, the great universally progressive features of Jewish culture have made themselves clearly felt. Its internationalism, its responsiveness of the advanced movements of our times, the percentage of Jews in democratic and proletarian movements is everywhere higher than the percentage of Jews in the general population. Those Jewish Marxists who join up in the international Marxist organizations with the Russian, Lithuanian, Ukrainian, and other workers, adding their might, both in Russian and in Jewish, to the creation of an international culture of the working class movement, are continuing the best traditions of Jewry. Anti-Semitism is dangerous for the toilers, for it is a false track which diverts them from the proper road and leads them into the jungle. Hence, the communists, as consistent internationalists, cannot be irreconcilable and bitter enemies of anti-Semitism. In the USSR, anti-Semitism is strictly prosecuted as a phenomenon hostile to the Soviet system. According to the laws of the USSR, active anti-Semites are punished with death. Jews have always controlled the business. The motion picture influence of the United States and Canada is exclusively under the control, moral and financial, of the Jewish manipulators of the public mind. I consider the immediate suppression of Bolshevism as the greatest issue before the world, not even excluding the war which is still raging. And unless, as above stated, Bolshevism is nipped in the bud immediately, it is bound to spread in one form or another over Europe and the whole world, as it is organized and worked by Jews who have no nationality and whose one object is to destroy for their own ends the existing order of things. Once the Jewishness of Bolshevism is understood, its otherwise puzzling features become understandable. Hatred of Christianity, for instance, is not a Russian characteristic, it is a Jewish one. The real forces behind Bolshevism in Russia are Jewish forces, and Bolshevism is really an instrument in the hands of the Jews for the establishment of their future messianic kingdom. The world today, however, provides a spectacle of great concentration of Jewish power. In New York, there is a concentration of Jewish financial power dominating the entire world in its material affairs, and side by side with it is the great physical concentration of the Jews ever recorded. On the other side of the globe, there has taken place in Russia the greatest concentration of the Jewish revolutionary activity in all history. The enormously significant thing in the world today is that both this power of the purse, Theodor Herzl's terrible Jewish power of the purse, and revolutionary activity are working in the direction of destroying the entire existing order of things. And not only for they working in a common direction, but there is a mass evidence that they are working in unison. Communism is Judaism. The Jewish Revolution in Russia was in 1918. There is nothing else in communism, a Jewish conspiracy to grab the whole world in their clutches, and no intelligent man in the world can find anything else except the Jews, who rightly call it for themselves a paradise on earth. Jews are eager to bring communism because they know what it is and what it means. It is because communism has not been fought for what it really is, a Jewish scheme invented by Jews, that it has progressed against all opposition to it. We have fought the smokescreen presented by the Jewish dialecticians and publicists, refusing to fight the inventor, profiteer, and string puller, because the Christians and Gentiles have come to fear the Jews, fear the truth, and they are paralyzed by the paradoxical slogans shouted by the Jews. The Frankenstein of communism is the product of the Jewish mind, and was turned loose upon the world by the son of a rabbi, Karl Marx, in the hopes of destroying Christian civilization, as well as others. The testimony given before the Senate of the United States, which is taken from the many pages of the Overman Report, reveals beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jewish bankers financed the Russian Revolution. Roman Catholic popes and their feelings toward the Jews are illustrated as follows. Sylvester I condemned Jewish anti-Christian activity. Gregory I, the Great, protested wholesale circumcision of Christian slaves by Jewish traders who monopolized the slave trade in Europe and the Middle East and were widely suspected of supplying white girls to Oriental and African buyers. Gregory VIII forbade Jews to have power over Christians. In a letter to Alfonso VI of Castile, Gregory IX condemned the Talmud as containing, quote, every kind of vileness and blasphemy against Christian doctrine, unquote. Benedict XIII, his bull on the Jewish issue, 1450, declared, quote, the heresies, vanities, and errors of the Talmud prevent their knowing the truth, unquote. Julius III, Contra Hebreos Retenentis Libros, 1554, ordered the Talmud burned everywhere and established a strict censorship over Jewish genocidal writings, in order that has never been rescinded and which presumably is still binding upon Catholics. Paul IV, Cum Nimis Absurdum, 1555, promulgated immediately after his coronation, was a powerful condemnation of Jewish usury. It embodies a model legal code to curb Jewish power that was recommended to all communities. Pius IV condemned Jewish genocidal writings. Pius V, Hebraeorum Gens, 1569, expelled all Jews from the Papal States. Gregory XIII declared that Jews, quote, continue to plot horrible crimes against Christians with daily increasing audacity, unquote. Clement VIII condemned Jewish genocidal writings. Alexander VIII condemned Jewish genocidal writings. Benedict XIV, Quio Primum, 1751, denounced Jewish control of commerce and systematical despoliation of the Christian through usury. Pius VII, known generally as an anti-Semite by Jewish writers. Benedict XV warned in 1920 against, quote, the advent of a universal republic which is longed for by all the worst elements of disorder, unquote. This is resented by some Jews because of their active sponsorship and direction of such projects as the League of Nations and United Nations. And in effect, all popes who have issued editions of the Index Expurgatorius, in which Jewish genocidal and anti-Christian writings are condemned, according to the instructions of the Council of Trent. While in command of the 13th Army Corps, headquartered at Oxford, Mississippi, he became so infuriated at Jewish camp followers attempting to penetrate the conquered territory that he finally attempted to expel the Jews. Quote, I have long since believed that in spite of all the vigilance that can be infused into post commanders, the special regulations of the Treasury Department have been violated, and that mostly by Jews and other unprincipled traitors. So well satisfied have I been of this, that I instructed the commanding officers at Columbus to refuse all permits to Jews to come south, and I have frequently had them expelled from the department. But they come in with their carpet sacks in spite of all that can be done to prevent it. The Jews seem to be a privileged class that can travel anywhere. They will land at any wood yard on the river and make their way through the country. If not permitted to buy cotton themselves, they will act as agents for someone else, who will be at a military post with a treasury permit to receive cotton and pay for it in treasury notes, which the Jew will buy up at an agreed rate, paying gold. Number one, the Jews, as a class, violating every regulation of trade established by the Treasury Department and also department orders, are hereby expelled from the department. Number two, within 24 hours from the receipt of this order by post commanders, they will see that all of this class of people are furnished with passes and required to leave, and anyone returning after such notification will be arrested and held in confinement until an opportunity occurs of sending them out as prisoners unless furnished with permits from these headquarters. Number three, no permits will be given these people to visit headquarters for the purpose of making personal application for trade permits. The expulsion order was immediately countermanded by the General-in-Chief H.W. Halleck in Washington. Apparently, the expelled Jews had immediately contacted their kinsmen there and had pressure brought to bear. In a letter from Union-occupied Memphis, July 30th, 1862, he wrote, I found so many Jews and speculators here trading in cotton, and secessionists had become so open in refusing anything but gold, that I have felt myself bound to stop it. The gold can have but one use, the purchase of arms and ammunition. Of course, I have respected all permits by yourself or the Secretary of the Treasury, but in these new cases, these swarms of Jews, I have stopped it, as did Generals Ulysses S. Grant and William T. Sherman. Ross confronted Jewish carpetbagging cotton traders preying upon captured Confederate areas during the Civil War. In a letter to General John A. McClernand, he wrote, quote, the cotton speculators are quite clamorous for aid in getting their cotton away from Middleburg, Hickory Valley, etc., and offer to pay liberally for the service. I think I can bring it away with safety and make it pay to the government, as some of the Jew owners have as good as stolen the cotton from the planters. I have no conscientious scruples in making them pay liberally to take it away. In the U.S. cotton states after the war, the Jew came down in force, set up shop on the plantation, supplied all the Negroes' wants on credit, and at the end of the season was the proprietor of the Negro share of the present crop and part of the next one. Before long, the whites detested the Jew. The Jew is being legislated out of Russia,
The reason is not concealed. The movement was instituted because the Christian peasant stood no chance against his commercial abilities. The Jew was always ready to lend on a crop. When settlement day came, he owned the crop. The next year he owned the farm, like Joseph. In the England of John's time, everybody got into debt to the Jew. He gathered all lucrative enterprises into his hands. He was the king of commerce. He had to be banished from the realm. For like reasons, Spain had to banish him 400 years ago, and Austria a couple of centuries later. In all ages, Christian Europe has been obliged to curtail his activities. If he entered upon a trade, the Christian had to retire from it. If he set up as a doctor, he took the business. If he exploited agriculture, the other farmers had to get at something else. The law had to step in to save the Christian from the poorhouse. Still, almost bereft of employments, he found ways to make money, even to get rich. This history has a most sordid and practical commercial look. Religious prejudices may account for one part of it, but not for the other 9. Protestants have persecuted Catholics, but they did not take their livelihoods away from them. Catholics have persecuted Protestants, but they never closed agriculture and the handicrafts against them. I feel convinced that the crucifixion has not much to do with the world's attitude toward the Jew, that the reasons for it are much older than that event. I am convinced that the persecution of the Jew is not in any large degree due to religious prejudice. No, the Jew is a money-getter. He made it the end and aim of his life. He was at it in Rome. He has been at it ever since. His success has made the whole human race his enemy. You will say that the Jew is everywhere numerically feeble. When I read in the Encyclopedia Britannica that the Jewish population in the United States was 250,000, I wrote the editor and explained to him that I was personally acquainted with more Jews than that, and that his figures were without a doubt a misprint for 25 million. People had told me that they had reasons to suspect that for business reasons, many Jews did not report themselves as Jews. It looks plausible. I am strongly of the opinion that we have an immense Jewish population in America. I am assured by men competent to speak that the Jews are exceedingly active in politics. Twain's opinion on the Jews is probably the best-kept secret in American literary history. Immediately after his death, his eccentric daughter Clara married, or was married by, the Jewish piano player Osip Gabrilowitz. Twain's publishers were given speedy instructions to delete Concerning the Jews from the collective works where it had appeared in the book The Man That Corrupted Hattlebury and Other Stories. Since Jews provided most of the agitators and orators who pushed forward the abolition campaign that culminated in the Civil War, which Jewish bankers largely financed on both sides, lest we forget that the slaves were brought over here by the Jews, and that the white colonists had slavery very much illegal before the Jews influenced politics and convinced the white people to make slaves of the Africans. It seems a legitimate question whether there was any pre-planning for the wholesale and retail economic looting done by many Jewish carpetbaggers after the war. We have cited a host of other writers on the terrible economic depredation that Jewry visited on the people of Tsarist Russia. The Jews are not merely a different religious community, but this is the most important factor: ethnically an altogether different race. The European felt instinctively that the Jew is a stranger who immigrated from Asia. The so-called prejudice is natural sentiment. Civilization will overcome antipathy against the Israelite who merely professes another religion, but never against the racially different Jew. In Eastern Europe, the Jew is the cancer slowly eating into the flesh of other nations. Exploitation of the people is his only aim. Selfishness and the lack of personal courage are his chief characteristics. Self-sacrifice and patriotism are altogether foreign to him. The Jew alone regards his race as superior to humanity and looks forward not to its ultimate union with other races, but its triumph over them all, and to its final ascendancy under the leadership of a tribal messiah. The Jews could be put down very plausibly as the most unpleasant race ever heard of. As commonly encountered, they lack any of the qualities that mark the civilized man: courage, dignity, incorruptibility, ease, confidence. They have vanity without pride, voluptuousness without taste, and learning without wisdom. Their fortitude, such as it is wasted upon puerile objects, and their charity is mainly a form of display. The fact that what are commonly spoken of as rights are often really privileges is demonstrated in the case of the Jews. They resent bitterly their exclusion from certain hotels, resorts, and other places of gathering, and make determined efforts to horn in. But the moment any considerable number of them horns in, the attractions of the place diminish, and the more pushful Jews turn to one where they are still not wanted. I am one of the few Goyim who have ever actually tackled the Talmud. I suppose you now expect me to add that it is a profound and noble work, worthy of hard study by all other Goyim. Unhappily, my report must differ from this expectation. It seems to me, save for a few bright spots, to be quite indistinguishable from rubbish. The Jewish theory that the Goyim envy the superior ability of the Jews is not born out of facts. Most Goyim, in fact, deny that the Jew is superior, and point in evidence to his failure to take the first prizes. He has to be content with the seconds. No Jewish composer has ever come within miles of Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms. No Jew has ever challenged the top flight painters of the world, and no Jewish scientist has equaled Newton, Darwin, Pasteur, or Mendel. In the latter bracket, such apparent exceptions as Ehrlich, Freud, and Einstein are only apparent. Ehrlich, in fact, contributed less to biochemical fact than to biochemical theory, and most of his theory was dubious. Freud was 9/10 quack, and there is sound reason for believing that even Einstein will not hold up. In the long run, his curved space may be classed with psychosomatic bumps of Gall and Spurzheim. But whether this inferiority of the Jew is real or only a delusion, it must be manifest that it is generally accepted. The Goy does not, in fact, believe that the Jew is better than the non-Jew. The most he will admit is that the Jew is smarter at achieving worldly success. But this he ascribes to sharp practices, not to superior ability. This is the real enemy, the invader from the east, the Druze, the ruffian, the oriental parasite. In a word, the Jew. This craving for bouquets by Jews is a symptom of racial degeneration. The Jews are worse than my own people. Those Jews who still want to be a chosen race, chosen by the late Lord Balfour, can go to Palestine and stew in their own juice. The rest had better stop being Jews and start being human beings. The Jew has never had an art of his own, hence never alive of art-enabling import. So long as the separate art of music had a real organic life need in it, down to the epics of Mozart and Beethoven, there was nowhere to be found a Jew composer. It was utterly impossible for an element quite foreign to that living organism to take part in the formative stages of that life. Only when a body's inner death is manifest do outside elements win the power of judgment in it, yet merely to destroy it. On one thing I am clear. This is the influence which the Jews have gained upon our mental life, as displayed in the deflection and falsification of our highest cultural tendencies. Whether the downfall of our culture can be arrested by the violent rejection of the destruction alien element, I am unable to decide, since that would require forces whose existence I am unacquainted. Capitalism was born from the money loan. Money lending contains the root idea of capitalism. Turn to the pages of the Talmud, and you will find that the Jews made an art of lending money. They were taught early to look to their chief happiness in the possession of money. They fathomed all the secrets that lay hid in money. They became lords of money and lords of the world. Down a tall, busy street, he read a dozen Jewish names on the line of stores. In the door of each stood a dark little man watching the passers from intent eyes, eyes gleaming with suspicion, with pride, with clarity, with cupidity, with comprehension. New York, he could not disassociate it from the slow, upward creep of this people. The little stores, growing, expanding, consolidating, moving, watched over with hawk's eyes and a bee's attention to detail. They were Jews. The sufferance which is the badge of the Jew has made him, in these days, the ruler of the rulers of the earth. After a sting at a council at Damascus, Syria, where some years before a Catholic priest was allegedly murdered in a blood ritual by Jews, Burton took an interest in the matter. His investigation satisfied him that such killings actually were performed by certain sects of Jews. The Jew's hand was ever, like Ishmael's, against every man but those belonging to the synagogue. His fierce passions and fiendish cunning, combined with abnormal powers of intellect, with intense vitality, and with a persistency of purpose which the world has rarely seen, and whetted moreover by a keen thirst for blood engendered by defeat and subjection, combined to make him the deadly enemy of all mankind, whilst his unsocial and iniquitous oral law contributed to inflame his wild lust of self and to justify the crime suggested infested by spite and superstition. Liberalism in the case of the Jew means internationalism. If you listen to the Jews discuss Jews, you will find they are money-minded, very sharp in practice. The Jews lack the fine integrity which at last is endorsed and to a certain degree followed by lawyers of other nationalities. The Jew has been in Germany for 1,000 years, and he is still a Jew. He has been in America for all of 200 years, and he has not faded into a pure American by any means, and he will not. The Jews look for a special Savior, a Messiah who was to redeem mankind by the agreeable process of restoring the fabulous glories of David and Solomon, and bringing the whole world at last under the firm but benevolent Jewish heel. Zionism is an expression of Jewish refusal to assimilate. If the Jews have suffered, it is because they have regarded themselves as a chosen people. A careful study of anti-Semitism, prejudice, and accusations might be of great value to many Jews who do not adequately realize the irritations they inflict. H.G. Wells was further of the habit of referring to Karl Marx as a shallow third-rate Jew and a, quote, lousy Jew in private correspondence. We are disturbed about the effect of the Jewish influence in our press, radio, and motion pictures. It may become very serious. Fulton Lewis told us of one instance where the Jewish advertising firms threatened to remove all their advertising from the mutual system if a certain feature were permitted to go on the air. The threat was powerful enough to have the feature removed. The pressure for war is high and mounting. The people are opposed to it, but the administration seems to have a bit in its teeth and is hell-bent on its way to war. Most of the Jewish interests in the country are behind war, and they control a huge part of our press and radio and most of our motion pictures. There are the intellectuals and the Anglophiles and the British agents who are allowed free rein, the international financial interests, and many others. The war now proposed is for the purpose of establishing Jewish influence throughout the world. The Jewish people is and remains in Europe an Asiatic people alien to our part of the world, bound to that old law which it received in a distant climate, and which, according to its confession, it cannot do away with. How many of this alien people can be tolerated without injury to the true citizen? A ministry in which a Jew is supreme, a household in which a Jew has the key of the wardrobe and the management of the finances, a department or commissariat in which Jews do the principal business, are Pontine marshes which cannot be drained. For thousands of years, since their emergence on the stage of history, the Jews were a parasitic growth on the stem of other nations, a race of cunning brokers all over the earth. They have caused great evil to many ill-organized states by retarding the free and natural economic development of their indigenous population. The Jews provided troops for my campaign in Poland, but they ought to reimburse me. I soon found that they are no good for anything but selling old clothes. Legislating must be put in effect everywhere that the general well-being is in danger. The government cannot look with indifference on the way a despicable nation takes possession of all the provinces of France. The Jews are the master robbers of the modern age. They are the carrion birds of humanity. They must be treated with political justice, not with civil justice. They are surely not real citizens. The Jews have practiced usury since the time of Moses and oppressed the other peoples. Meanwhile, the Christians were rarely usurers, falling into disgrace when they did so. We ought to ban the Jews from commerce because they abuse it. The evils of the Jews do not stem from individuals but from the fundamental nature of this people. Nothing more contemptible could be done with the reception of the Jews by you. I decided to improve the Jews, but I do not want any more of them in my kingdom. Indeed, I have done all to prove my scorn of the most vile nation in the world. Number 1, every big and small Jew in the peddling trade must renew his license every year. Number 2, checks and other obligations are only redeemable if the Jew can prove that he has obtained the money without cheating. Addressing Zionists in a Mideast news conference, the Jews remain what they have been at all times, an elite people, self-confident and domineering. I saw the wandering Jew, the personification of the Jewish people, exiled in the Middle Ages. Nevertheless, they are once again extremely rich, owing to their unfailing rude greediness and their indefatigable activity. With their hard-heartedness that they extend toward people of other faiths and races, they are at the point of making themselves kings of the world. This people can thank its obstinacy that France will be Judaized within 50 years. Already some wise Jews prophesy this, frankly. In an address to the Assembly in 1790, the city's revolutionary leaders opposed citizenship for Jews because, quote, everyone knew the inherent bad character of the Jews, and no one doubted they were foreigners. Let the enlighteners stop defaming the Gentiles by blaming them for what is wrong with the Jews. Their conduct is their own fault. Perhaps the Jews might eventually give up every aspect of their separation and all the characteristics of their nature. Let us sit and wait until that happens. We might then judge them to be worthy of equality. Though hostile on almost every point to National Socialism, The House that Hitler built does admit that Jews were a menace in Germany. Quote, "It is useless to deny that grave Jewish problems existed in Germany. The nation was in the unfortunate geographical position of being the first stage in the perennial push westward of the Polish Jews. Unless forced on, they tended to stop in Berlin and Hamburg, where they obtained an unduly share of good professional positions. In Berlin, for example, when the Nazi came to power, 50.2% of the lawyers were Jews. In medicine, 48% of the doctors were Jews. And it was said that they systematically seized the principal hospital posts. The Jews owned the largest and most important Berlin newspapers, and they had made great inroads on the educational system. Let us be under no illusion. The Jewish spirit, which was responsible for the alliance of large-scale capital with Marxism and was the driving force behind so many anti-Spanish revolutionary agreements, will not be got rid of in a day." He stressed that the instruments of Jewish domination in the modern world are money and the press, and that communism is an instrument of international Jewish capitalism used to smash and afterwards rule the nations. In 1848, the word anti-Semitic was invented by the Jews to prevent the use of the word Jew. The right word for them is Jew. I implore all of you to be accurate. Call them Jews. There is no need to be delicate on this Jewish question. You must face them in this country. The Jews have caused an epidemic of corruption and social unrest. They monopolize the press, which, with foreign help, flays all the spiritual treasures of the Romanians. To defend ourselves is a national and patriotic duty, not anti-Semitism. Lack of measures to get rid of the plague would indicate that we are lazy cowards who let ourselves be carried alive to our graves. Why should we not get rid of these parasites who suck Romanian and Christian blood? It is logical and holy to react against them. The revelation of Christ has no significance for the Jew. I have searched through a whole library of Jewish books in the expectation of finding, naturally not belief in the divinity of Christ, nor the idea of redemption, but the purely human feeling for the greatness of suffering Savior, but in vain. A Jew who feels that is, in fact, no longer a Jew, but a denier of Judaism. And while we find, even in Muhammad's Quran, at least vague conception of the importance of Christ and profound reverence for his personality, a cultured leading Jew of the 19th century, Graetz, calls Christ, quote, "the new birth with the death mask," unquote, which inflicted new and painful wounds upon the Jewish people. He cannot see anything else in him. In view of the cross, he assures us that, quote, "the Jews do not require this convulsive emotion for their spiritual improvement," and adds, quote, "particularly not among the middle classes of inhabitants of the cities," unquote. His comprehension goes further. In a book republished in 1880 by a Spanish Jew, Jesus Christ is called a dead dog that lies, quote, "buried in a dunghill," unquote. Besides, Jews have taken care to issue in the latter part of the 19th century several editions, naturally in Hebrew, of the so-called censored pages from the Talmud. Those pages usually omitted in which Christ is exposed to our scorn and hatred as a fool, sorcerer, profane person, idolater, dog, bastard, child of lust, etc. So too, his sublime mother. Through their international news agencies, they mold your minds and have you see the world not as it is, but as they want you to see it. Through their cinema, they are the educators of our youth, and with just one film in 2 hours, can wipe out a child's brain what he has learned in 6 months in the home, the church, or the school. England is no longer controlled by Britons. We are under the invisible Jewish dictatorship, a dictatorship that can be felt in every sphere of life. Henry Wallace, Secretary of Commerce under President Harry Truman, wrote in his diary that in 1946, quote, "Truman was exasperated over Jewish pressure that he support Zionist rule over Palestine." Wallace added, quote, "President Truman expressed himself as being very much put out with the Jews. He said that Jesus Christ couldn't please them when he was here on earth, so how could anyone expect that I would have any luck? President Truman said he had no use for them and didn't care what happened to them. New York is the city of privilege. Here is the seat of invisible power represented by the allied forces of finance and industry. This invisible government is reactionary, sinister, unscrupulous, mercenary, and sordid. It is wanting in national ideals and devoid of conscience. This kind of government must be scourged and destroyed." The Jewish question is really the most serious of our problems. One by one, the Jews are capturing the principal newspapers of America. Truman Capote, in an interview he assailed the Zionist mafia was monopolizing the publishing industry and protested a tendency to suppress things that do not meet with Jewish approval. Why are the Jews hated? It is the inevitable result of their laws. They either have to conquer everybody or be hated by the whole human race. The Jewish nation dares to display an irreconcilable hatred toward all nations and revolts against all masters, always superstitious, always greedy for the well-being enjoyed by others, always barbarous, cringing in misfortune, and insolent in prosperity. You seem to me to be the maddest of the lot. The Kafirs, the Hottentots, and the Negroes of Guyana are much more reasonable and more honest people than your ancestors, the Jews. You have surpassed all nations in impertinent fables, in bad conduct, and in barbarism. You deserve to be punished, for this is your destiny. You will only find in the Jews an ignorant and barbarous people who for a long time have joined the most sordid avarice, to the most detestable superstition, and to the most invincible hatred of all peoples which tolerate and enrich them. I know that there are some Jews in the English colonies. These Moranos go wherever there is money to be made. But whether these circumcised who sell old clothes claim that they are the tribe of Naphtali or Issachar is not of the slightest importance. They are simply the biggest scoundrels who ever dirtied the face of the earth. They are, all of them, born with raging fanaticism in their hearts, just as the Britons and the Germans are born with blonde hair. I would not be in the least bit surprised if these people would not someday become deadly to the human race. This video has been produced with respect to Dr. E.R. Feets for his book bearing the same name. This video can be watched for free at www.concerningthejews.com. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. May we all one day be free of the domination of the Jew.
But he left one final warning.
1984 is, I believe, a quite terrifying masterpiece. So terrifying, in fact, I don't think I should like to read another like it.
I am not absolutely dissatisfied with it. I think it is a good idea, but the execution would have been better if I had not been under the influence of TB when I wrote it.
You once claimed that you have an ability to face unpleasant facts. Is that what you've demonstrated in 1984 by drawing an accurate portrait of the future?
I think that allowing for the book being, after all, a parody, something like 1984 could actually happen. This is the direction the world is going in at the present time. In our world, there will be no emotions except fear, rage, triumph, and self-abasement. The sex instinct will be eradicated. We shall abolish the orgasm. There will be no loyalty except loyalty to the party. But always there will be the intoxication of power. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.
I am William Wallace. And I see a whole army of my countrymen here in defiance of tyranny. You've come to fight as free men. And free men you are. What will you do without freedom? Will you fight? Against that? and we will live. Aye. Fight and you may die. Run and you'll live. At least a while. And dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Hey guys, this is Dabu7. Wanted to share with you this map that really depicts exactly what's going down in Europe as far as the people migrating out of other areas and showing up in Europe. Now, not only Europe, there's other countries like the United States that's talking about taking in some of these migrants. But I've reported on many of these situations. One most recently was Hungary. They've put up a 100-mile razor wire fence at the border to stop people from coming through. But when looking at this map, you can see, as depicted here, from Libya, they've been launching up to and through Italy, through France, and trying to make their way into the UK. And as you can see down here, from Syria, they just marched right on through Turkey, right down to the Greek islands, at a rate of 2,000 a day, crossing from Turkey over into this area, up through Greece, and then into Serbia. And it's this point in Serbia where they started to surge through Hungary, and they cut them off, or they're trying to cut them off right now. But you can see, once they get to Germany, this is the point in Germany where they're fanning out all across the place. And they're saying a lot of them. This year, 80,000 refugees are expected in Sweden alone. They just keep traveling farther north. And they're heading into the UK, Sweden, pretty much those two spots, as well as Denmark. It's as far as they can go up north here, in all directions. But this shows the routes in which they're taking. I wanted to point it out so people could see that this is the route in which they're being migrated to go. And they're being pushed here all of a sudden on purpose. It's not a coincidence we just caught George Soros and company handing out pamphlets to these people. It's not a coincidence that hundreds of these migrants that are young men are storming some of these borders and fighting the police, going back and forth, and yet the mainstream media won't say nothing about the cops or the migrants getting injured, but they'll say, oh, 2 children were injured. And as I've shown in other videos, a majority of these migrants are younger men, or older age men, but men nonetheless. And none of them are being screened, or they were not being screened. And you see, now that a lot of them slipped in, the countries are trying to lock down their borders to protect their country. And if you think about it, what's been happening in Libya and Syria has been going on for years now. Why all of a sudden in the past month, couple months, has this just took a massive surge? Like somebody's down there with a bullhorn ushering them up this way. You know what it reminds me? It reminds me of just not long ago when Joe Biden took a trip to South America and made a statement in front of everyone down there that, oh, well, any children that make it into the United States, we'll let their parents in to get them, and then we'll figure out what to do with them from there. Hint, hint. And then the next thing you know, we had trainloads. I mean trainloads of people coming up to our southern border and crossing it. Did everybody forget? It was massive. They were just flooding in. Then all of a sudden it stopped. Just stopped. The huge flood stopped. Not another word about it after people started talking about it. And now, fast forward to today, we're seeing the same flood and push of people north. And I'm telling you, it didn't just happen overnight. These places have been war-torn for a long time. And to see a surge like this is something to keep an eye on here. Yes, there's been migrants making their way through the whole time. Yes, there's innocent women and children involved in this too. But something's not right with this burst of people all of a sudden flooding into these areas. So I just wanted to put this out there so people could get a good visual on where they're heading and what to expect. Truly making their way and invading through Europe, because the way that I see it, it's not your everyday family members and migrants that you have to worry about. It's these militants, obviously, and the guys that are being handed pamphlets and backed by George Soros. And at the border, Spiro covered this in a video, there were 10,000 fake Syrian passports dumped right near the Hungary border. Meaning all these guys that were trying to get through, before they hit the checkpoint, they dumped them. Well, then they found them anyway. You know what that means? That means that these migrants were trying to smuggle in 10,000 fake Syrian IDs, which shows you it's even more of a sham. Who would have got their hands on those? The 10,000 they're bringing to America? People better wake up quick. Huge staged invasion here. I'll keep you guys posted as I come across more. This has been Dabu7. Eyes open.
I'm going to throw some stats out there real quick for you. I assume that most of our readers are relatively familiar with what's happening with the refugees coming out of the Middle East into Europe. But just to give you some brief numbers on this, 366,402 refugees have arrived crossing the Mediterranean Sea already this year. 51%, 186,865, have been Syrian. Now, this is all being pitched as a Syrian refugee crisis. Of course, it is. With 51%, that's a significant number coming from Syria. But what the stat that you're not seeing often, especially in mainstream media, is that 12% are coming from Afghanistan, and then there's a divided 29% that's coming in from Nigeria, Iraq, Sudan, and Somalia. This is significant to see almost 500,000 people this year so far come from Arab countries into Europe. And countries like Germany are saying they're expecting up to 800,000 or even 1 million this year alone. There's a number of reasons why this is significant. The first being financial. If you've watched what's happened over the last 6 months in countries like Greece, and it's now that cancer of fiscal breakdown is now spreading to other countries in Europe, there is no way possible that there's no mathematical solution for Europe to be able to manage and financially deal with bringing in more than 1 million people from Arab countries by the end of this year. That doesn't even talk about next year or what's to come down the road. That's this year alone. Over 1 million, probably up to 1 million in just Germany, probably a couple million across Europe. These countries are broke. They have no money. Greece almost completely burned to the ground financially just a month or two ago, and they had to take on new debt just to be able to pay some bills. If you look at the history over the last 3 years, the last couple of years, you see examples of what happens when governments don't have the financial ability to create social welfare programs, safety nets, when there's no jobs. Youth, and this happened in Paris, Arab youth come out in the streets and riot, burn cars down, do damage to businesses and loot. This is, go Google this. You know, this has happened several times over the last 3, 5, 6, 10 years. So when in those instances that we've seen in recent history, it would be 150 or 250 or 500 youth out in the streets causing chaos because they have no food, they have no ability to take care of families, they have no job, they have no money, they're not getting any help, and they want to blame somebody, they want to cause problems. Well, imagine what's going to happen when you take 150 or 500 youth and you turn that into 150,000 or 500,000 or 1.5 million coming out of Arab nations into Europe upset that they can't get food, they can't get the living situation that they want, they can't get the social welfare system to give them what they want, what do you think is going to happen? There's going to be chaos. And Europe just doesn't have the money to deal with this. So it's just absurd that we're all acting like, well, this is a humanitarian thing and it just has to be done. It's not possible for it to be done. It's not a matter of do we want to help, it's a matter of can we help. And if you have two bodies, one is the one that's producing and is surviving and taking care of itself, barely, struggling through a tough economy, and then you have those coming from very poor Arab nations who don't bring productivity to the nations that they're coming to, both are going to collapse. So that's going to happen just from a fiscal perspective, not even taking the Muslim perspective into account here. First, looking at the fiscal perspective, it's just not possible. And furthermore, what's really bizarre about this is how this has escalated in a very significant way over the last couple weeks. And if you look at media footage and if you look at videos showing these refugees coming in by the thousands, and in some cases 10,000, they're coming off of big ships, like these big passenger ferries or even freighters in some instances that just have thousands of people on them. And they come in on trains with thousands of people on these trains. I don't even understand how that's, I mean, the idea that this all just happened. It just accidentally happened, or I don't know what exactly they're trying to explain it as, but this was planned in some way, shape, or form. Money and infrastructure and bureaucracies had to be created to deal with what's happened over the last couple weeks. So we're just now hearing about it. It's just now being reported because it's just now being seen. But somebody has known that this was coming at this level. And somebody was preparing for it financially with billions of dollars. Someone was orchestrating infrastructure to be able to check with people when they come off the boats, or what boats were being sent where, what trains were being sent where. This is a very costly and expensive enterprise that's running to be able to deal with these refugees as they come in. And who orchestrated that? How did they know that that was going to happen? And who's paying for it? There's just a lot of questions on this that just don't make sense. And then finally, as you see in the article on libertynews.com, there is something I think very sinister at work here. I was watching a news show yesterday on a lunch break, and they were showing this whole humanitarian thing. You know, it's all for the children. Same thing they do at the invasion at our southern borders down Texas, Arizona, our border with Mexico. Well, it's the children. We can't leave the children hungry down there. We can't leave the mothers hungry. They're just coming for a better life. That's the argument that the left has used and Republicans have used for years on why we don't address the border situation. Even though I've been down there. I've been on the Rio Grande. I've been at the border. I spent weeks down traveling from California down in Texas. I've seen this firsthand. It's grown men who were able to take care of themselves down south. They can grow their own food. They may not have jobs that build mansions, but they could certainly grow their own food and try to survive and take care of themselves in the south. But they came across the border and now have access to our social welfare system. Well, this is happening in an epic scale in Europe, where it says here in total, let's see, of the European host countries, Greece takes on most of the arrivals with 244,855 so far this year, followed by Italy receiving 115,000. In total, 75%, this is the key right here, 75% of the refugees are reported to be men, 12% women, and 13% children. 75% of the refugees are grown men. So 3 out of every 4 of these refugees are grown men. So if they're fleeing civil war, you would typically think, well, let's get the women and children. It's like the Titanic. The Titanic's sinking, get the women and children on the boats. In this scenario, it's the men who should be there trying to fight for their country. Now, it's hard for me to compare because, you know, I don't know what it feels like. I've been to Israel, I've been in the Middle East, but I don't live there. I'm not from there, so maybe I just view it differently. But if we had civil war, or if we had some sort of invasion or some sort of war here in the United States, I think I would be very accurate in asserting or assuming that most men would pick up arms and fight that battle. Even if it looked like we were going to lose that battle, we would pick up arms and fight. We wouldn't run to another country. So it's really odd to me how 75% of these refugees are grown men from Arab nations, some of which aren't having the wars. I mean, this is not just Syria. Again, this is Afghanistan, Nigeria, Iraq, Sudan, Somalia, which granted, none of these countries are a walk in the park. But to pitch this as a Syrian refugee crisis is inaccurate. This is an exodus from the entire Middle East. And while this is happening, you also have Obama going in there, and I think intentionally, trying to fund, bankroll, and empower Iran, who wants to go to war with Saudi Arabia and Israel. So it's just a toxic soup of U.S.-backed, basically funding and creating infrastructure for terrorism and war across the Middle East, and also this exodus of Muslims out of the Middle East into Europe and the West. And I don't have to tell you, I think our readers are smart enough to know and want to seek the information that's out there to know that when these refugees are coming to Europe, they are starting riots, they're fighting with police, they're stealing things. When food trucks show up, there's just a plethora of reports of food vans that'll show up when there's, to a crowd of 1,000 refugees, mostly Arab men, try to give food, and instead they just get pushed out of the way, the van gets taken, the food gets taken, and there's just chaos. So there's no respect for the European culture or the culture of the West. It's literally people coming here saying, give me this because I want it, and I don't want to become a part of your culture, but I'm going to live here because I don't want to live where I came from. And it's just, the whole thing is just really bizarre, and it's very, very dangerous. And one more piece of this that I'll bring up, this is that when I say Trojan horse, there's a word for it. It's Hijrah. I believe it's pronounced Hijra, which is it's an Arabic word that describes, in the year 622, the Islamic prophet Muhammad set out on the first Hijra. And in short, it's the act of migrating to other parts of the world with the intention of spreading the grip of Islam. So let me say that again. Hijra is the act of migrating to other parts of the world with the intention of spreading the grip of Islam. Now, every single refugee coming out of the Middle East into Europe may not have that on their mind right now, but for ISIS, and they've admitted this, they have that on their mind. The people that are causing the exodus and that are pushing the exodus to happen, on their minds, the objective is Hijra. For the purpose of jihad and ultimately for the purpose of establishing a caliphate on a global scale. So, and ISIS has even said that they've already gotten 4,000 trained killers, trained gunmen into Europe. And we did a report a couple months ago that showed that these intelligence agencies in Europe are saying that they believe there's up to 8,000 trained members of ISIS or other terror groups already in Europe. So if we know that there are 4,000 or 8,000 ISIS or trained gunmen, trained terrorists in Europe with the intention of creating terror across the globe, how many do you think are there now that there are hundreds of thousands of mostly men coming out of the Middle East into Europe, where they can then come into the United States? And Barack Obama is already saying he wants to bring another 10,000 or so next year from Syria into the United States. So this is, it's crazy that Obama is arming Iran, giving them billions and billions, over 100 billion to funnel into Hamas and various terrorist organizations across the Middle East. And at the same time, this exodus or this hijra of Arab men are coming out of the Middle East into Europe, thousands of whom are members of ISIS, trained gunmen, and want to do harm. And the media is not asking questions about what's really happening. They're just out there showing videos of women and children trying to find food. So I highly encourage you to do research, spread the word on this, because again, I think this is the most important story. This in combination with the Iran deal is the most important story of the cycle right now, if not of the, in fact, I think it is the most important story of the year. And we should be spreading the word. We should make sure everyone understands that something's happening here. It's well funded, it's well organized, it's well planned, it has an agenda, and it's not about women and children trying to seek food or a better life. It's about what's happening in the Middle East, the war that's coming, the Iran deal, and ultimately jihad and caliphate in Islam. So, again, it may not be the hundred thousands or multiple hundred thousands or a million people who think that this is the agenda, but it doesn't take all of them for this to be the agenda and the outcome. It only takes a portion of them. So this is very dangerous. Again, go to
my servants reign the land. Obsequious and arrogant, clandestine and vain. 2,000 years of misery, of torture in my name. Hypocrisy made paramount, paranoia the law. My name is no religion, sadistic, sacred born. I twist the truth, I rule the world. My crown is called deceit. I am the emperor of life. You gravel at my feet. I wrong you and not you. Your downfall is my gain. And do you play the psychopath and revel in my pain? And all my promise are lies. All my love is light. I am the politician, and I decide your fate. I hold a banner drenched in blood. I urge it to be